Stop the Nazi games indeed. Hallo allemaal, daar zijn we weer, RHTVLive. Natuurlijk streamen we live vanuit het mooie Maastricht. Ja, en dat laten we ook zien op de kaart. Zo voor de mensen die niet weten dat Maastricht in het zuiden des lands ligt. Ja, hello to you all. We are streaming live from Maastricht. And of course, we're going to give politics and geopolitics. And let's take a first look at what's happening in the Netherlands. A Dutch diplomat had said, I am going to quit my job for the people in Gaza. So, ja, een Nederlands diplomaat die heeft gezegd van nou, ik stop ermee. En ja, zoek een afgezante voor Gaza en zoiets. We gaan even naar een clipje kijken. So here we have the Dutch diplomat Angelique Eipe resigns in protest of Dutch government's Gaza policy. Ja, een Nederlands diplomaat Angelique Eipe die zegt nee, ik doe hier niet meer aan mee. Ja, onze regering is fout bezig.
My name is Angelique Eipe. I'm a former Dutch diplomat. Amongst others, I worked at our embassy in Muscat as a deputy ambassador and at our Middle East desk here in The Hague. Given the Dutch policy with regard to Gaza, I could no longer be part of the organization because it was no longer in line with both my professional and personal integrity to continue working there. I wrote a lot in the resignation letter. I wrote about, the moral standing that we had lost. The Netherlands, for example, has refused to define what's going on as war crimes or potential war crimes. We have abstained twice in the UN General Assembly where it comes to voting for a ceasefire. We are here in The Hague, capital of peace and justice. All of that has our credibility has really suffered an extreme blow. And I tried to have a conversation with the minister and give a warning. And it was not just me, stepping forward with concerns, but many people within the organization. Civil servants from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs decided to have a sit-in every week from Thursday from 12 to 12:30 during their lunch break to make clear that they're still appealing for a ceasefire. It does take some courage to go and sit there and be part of this. Last week we had a joint statement that we brought forward with our American colleagues from State Department, European colleagues. This has never happened before. That civil servants across the Atlantic unite and give this kind of reflection back to their respective governments. So there was this rabbi that published this article this week, stating that he didn't really totally agree with our action in content-wise, but he was really happy over the fact that there were civil servants that had the courage to contradict governments. And he made a reference to 4045, in which civil servants generally in this country loyally implemented policy, resulting in the Netherlands being the country where most Jews were deported.
Well, you didn't have any concerns when you implemented the corona policy, right? Er waren geen kritiek op het coronabeleid. Nee. Dat is dan niks mis mee. Hè? Dat hebben we samen besloten, zogenaamd. Ja, maar als je dan kritiek hierop geeft, dat onze overheid die mensen in Gaza in de steek laat, eigenlijk. Die mensen kunnen nergens naartoe, krijgen geen elektriciteit, krijgen geen hulp, krijgen niks. Die moeten maar gaan uitsterven. Een uitstervingsbeleid in Gaza. En daar zijn we het dus niet mee eens. Nee, dat moet ophouden. So the Dutch government is standing by Israel, right? Saying they have a right to defend themselves But seeing what's happening in Gaza, people are resigning by our Dutch politics is very, very rotten to the core. We used to be a neutral country, right? We did not choose any sides of any war, right? We were neutral. But now we choose a side and we say the other side is bad. Oh, Russia is bad. Bad Russia. It's really stupid. Anyway, we're also going to take a look at a Palestinian. Ja, we gaan ook even naar een Palestijnse artiest kijken, die dus in Londen zit. En die heeft een hele grote schilderij gemaakt van de situatie in Gaza. So this woman here is from Palestine, from Gaza, and she made a mural, a very big drawing of what's happening in Gaza right now. Now let's take a look at this here.
My name is Malak Matar. I'm a Palestinian artist and author originally from the Gaza Strip. I'm based in London and I'm working on the biggest painting in my career documenting many elements of the genocide on the Gaza Strip. I grew up as a refugee, but Gaza was and has always been my home because it's the city that I know the most. And it's the most beautiful city, and it's where making art makes the most sense. We had a really rich cultural life, but it was absolutely disturbed by the brutality of bombardments and the hard reality of living in a prison. So for me, art came with a sense of urgency that I want to say something. I grew up with this spirit, and I wanted to show it to the world, that we have a big sense of resilience, of resistance, of loving life and wanting to make something out of nothing. It was my own way of recording as a witness, as a teenager, as a young adult, witnessing and recording the brutality of occupation. My work, started to become about life celebration, about Palestinian culture, about olive harvesting, about childhood. Yes, they were very colorful, but they were not too happy. But now it's not like I woke up and I decided I'm not going to use color anymore. I simply looked at all the colors and I only saw black because it's reality. And because this time is too hard, it's too brutal. My immediate family, they're all in Gaza, and it's so hard to be in touch with them for the entire month of October and the entire month of November. I couldn't even hold a brush or a pencil. It was a complete state of paralysis. But now I know whether I like it or not, it's my duty. And it's my responsibility to do. And not only for any audience, it's for us, the Palestinian generation. For us to never forget. For me, I'm trying to make a pause on the most important elements of this brutal genocide against my own people and against my own history.
Now, be aware of this, right? We're not choosing sides, we're just showing what's going on. We kiezen geen kant, we laten alleen zien wat er aan de hand is. Je hebt dus een Palestijnse kunstenares die een hele schilderij heeft gemaakt. Nou, dat is toch wel mooi om te zien, maar ook zeer, zeer beangstigend om te zien, gezien wat zij allemaal mee moeten maken. Bommen vallen dagelijks om hun heen en ze kunnen nergens naartoe gaan. Dit is de grootste oorlogsmisdaad, zo kun je het wel noemen, van de eeuw. Ja. En ja, eigenlijk kunnen we niet daar toekijken en zeggen dat er niks gebeurt. Ja. We cannot stand aside and say nothing is happening. These people have nowhere to go, and they get no electricity, no food, nothing. And they have to survive escaping bombings and stuff like that. Assassinations. It's really, really, really sad to see what's going on there. Yeah. And we just show the frame of reality, right? We willen alleen de realiteit laten zien. En we hebben het al een hele tijd over gehad, hè, over de Wuhan lab en zoiets allemaal. Hè. Nee, jij bent een complottheorist, jij bent een complottheorist. Dat werd dan steeds gezegd. Hè, want ja, we moeten de media geloven, hè, de frame van consensus, die moeten we gaan geloven. Maar de realiteit is dat het echt uit een laboratorium kwam en ja, dat het bewijs ligt voor de hand. We gaan zo even hier naar kijken. Zo. Watch Democrats sit in silence while Jim Jordan exposes Fauci's lies. They knew from the start they had made a biological weapon in Wuhan and it escaped from the lab. They knew from the start. And they had this cover-up that it came from a wet market and blah, 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 blah. You know, they knew from the start. So we're going to take a look at this. Ze wisten van het begin af aan eigenlijk al dat ze een leugen gingen vertellen.
Learned, I think the key lesson learned is that Dr. Fauci misled the country. And he did so right from the get-go. By February 1st, 2020, Dr. Fauci knew 7 fundamental facts, represented by the first 7 posters behind me, 7 fundamental facts that he did not share with the American people. First, he understood that American tax dollars went to eco-health, and that money was then funneled to a lab in Wuhan, China. Second, he knew eco-health was given an exemption from the pause on gain-of-function research. Third, the security standards at this lab in China were deficient. Fourth, Dr. Fauci knew that EcoHealth was not in compliance with their grant reporting requirements. They weren't adhering to the contract. Fifth, gain-of-function research was in fact being conducted in the lab in Wuhan, China. Sixth, the P3CO interagency review process wasn't followed in approving the grant to EcoHealth. And finally, 7, Dr. Fauci likely knew, let me say it the other way, Dr. Fauci knew that the virus likely came from the lab that our money was sent to. So think about it. American tax dollars went to a company that wasn't properly vetted, that didn't comply with its contract, who sent that money to a lab in China that wasn't up to code and was doing gain-of-function research. And what happens? The very city where that lab is at, a deadly virus breaks out, a deadly virus that would ultimately kill 6 million people around the world. And what did Dr. Fauci do when he had this information, again, February 1st, 2020? What did he do with this information? Did he tell the President of the United States? Did he go to the Commander-in-Chief and said, hey, we got a deadly virus broken out in China, in Wuhan, where we've been sending American tax dollars to a lab to code that's doing gain-of-function? Did he tell the President of the United States? Didn't tell the President. Did he tell the Chief of Staff? You know, maybe he thought, you know what, I don't want to take this bad news to the Commander-in-Chief. Maybe I'll give it to the Chief of Staff. I know he'll tell him. He talks to him every day. Did he tell the Chief of Staff? Didn't tell him either. How about the experts in our government? Did he tell his boss? Did he tell Secretary Azar? Did he tell Dr. Redfield, Dr. Birx? Did he tell Dr. Giroir, one of our witnesses today? Didn't tell any of them either. No, what he did instead was organize a conference call February 1st, 2020, 2 p.m. with him, Mr. Collins, and 11 virologists from around the world who he had been handing out American tax dollars to for years and years and years. And on that call, it's interesting. On that call are a couple virologists, Dr. Gary, Christian Anderson, who had said things like this. Here's what Christian Anderson said: virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory. He said that on January 31st, the day before. Dr. Gary said on February 1st, that very day they had the conference call, I don't know how this gets done in nature, but it would be easy to do in a lab. They all get on this conference call, they get their story straight, and 3 days later, the very people who said this thing came from a lab change their tune and say that anyone who thinks that's crazy. Wow, that's a dramatic change in a matter of days, and the only real intervening event was this conference call that Dr. Fauci organizes. You know, it's bad enough when you have the truth and you don't share it, but what's worse is when you have the truth and you say things that directly contradict it. Dr. Fauci told us over the last several years it wasn't our tax dollars. Yes, it was. Right there's the grant to EcoHealth. He told us it wasn't gain of function. How about this email from NIAID, from Mr. Dazik, the head of EcoHealth, to NIAID, where he says, "Dear Jenny, this is terrific. We are happy to hear that our gain of function research funding pause has been lifted." Dr. Fauci told us it wasn't a lab leak. Sure looks like it was. Sure looks like it was, and the people he's been handing out the money to, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Gary, said it was. And that's not to mention all the other crazy things he's told us. The vaccinated can't get it, the vaccinated can't transmit it. Boy, he was wrong about those. He told us that masks work. He told us that there was no such thing as natural immunity when it came to this virus. All kinds of things he told us wrong. So the lessons we learned is you can't trust some of the folks who were supposed to be giving us accurate information, because they sure didn't. And they knew from the get-go. They knew from the start. So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. Look forward to seeing exactly what's in this report. We didn't get into any of this. We didn't get into any of this. The chairman mentioned we can't look backwards. Well, we sure should look backwards. If you got government not giving it to you straight, that's something that you have to make sure we understand so it doesn't happen again. Not only we don't want a terrible virus happening again, we don't want the government misleading us about a virus that could happen. So we're going to look at this issue starting next month. We'll look into it. We'll make sure the country gets the facts like they should have had on February 1st, 3 years ago. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
We told the facts. We told it as it was, right? It came from a biolab. They're making biological weapons, biological warfare. It's a new dimension within warfare, right? First, you have troops, soldiers on the ground, and tanks, troops and equipment. That's the first thing, right? The second thing is long-range missiles, stuff like that, drones. And the third thing would be a biological pathogen that kills lots of people. There's also a fourth step, right? Atomic nuclear weapons and stuff. You know, so this is all military tactics, right? The COVID virus was basically a military-grade weapon. Yeah, we told it right from the start.
I now recognize Mr. Jordan from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ratcliffe, I think Dr. McCormick was on to the right question. It seems to me the fundamental question is why? Why did they lie to us? And why is it taking so long? You point this out in your testimony. Why is it taking so long for every government agency to admit what we all know? Because belief in a lab leak as the origin, as the start of this, is not a conspiracy theory, is it, Mr. Ratcliffe?
No.
Well, they said it was a conspiracy theory, right? They said, if you say it came from a lab leak, you are a weird right-wing conspiracy kook who believes anything, right? And now, let's take a listen to the question again.
Is it taking so long? You point this out in your testimony. Why is it taking so long for every government agency to admit what we all know? Because belief in a lab leak as the origin of, as the start of this, is not a conspiracy theory, is it, Mr. Ratcliffe?
No.
Why is it taking so long then? I mean, you knew that early on, right?
It's not a conspiracy theory, okay? We were right all along. We were banned on YouTube. We were banned on Facebook and other platforms just for speaking the truth. You know, it's really amazing.
Right. If I look at you knew that you were confirmed, I think, in May of 2020, and you knew that within weeks that this thing came from a lab. In fact, you say that, I think, in your testimony. You say a lab leak is the only explanation, only credible explanation. If this were a trial, the preponderance of the evidence is all on the side of the lab leak. You knew that within weeks. So why did the government not tell us the truth?
Well, I think, when you look at the intelligence community.
You want me to answer that for you, right? Government always lies. They always lie. They always conceal the truth, right? That's the first thing. The truth is the first thing that dies, right? They always cover things up. Look at John F. Kennedy. He got shot. And who is to blame? Lee Harvey Oswald? I don't think so. They covered that up. They covered 9/11 up. They cover up everything because people are supposed to believe that government is for the people, not against the people. You see? So, what about the weapons of mass destruction, right? Oh, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We got a dictator there. Yeah? There were no weapons of mass destruction.
The report that the Biden administration put out in October of 21, they acknowledge that China's refusal to cooperate, but the report in any way ignores what I think is the inescapable fact and reality that if the CCP had anything exculpatory, anything at all, anything that would be helpful to showing that no one was to blame for this, right, that this occurred naturally, that they would share that. And why not share data, samples, research, everything that tends to show that they had access to, that would tend to show that this was naturally occurring and tend to show that lab leak theory really was a conspiracy theory. But they didn't do that because they couldn't do that. And to me, that's why making an assessment with some level of confidence is something that should have been done a long time ago by the intelligence community. We need to.
No one did that because there's a connection between American intelligence and Chinese intelligence. It's like a ping pong ball, right? You have to play to the Chinese intelligence and they play back, and then you play, and then it goes like that, right? It's about information that you share. So, and there's lots of information that's top secret that is not shared by the intelligence agencies, right? So it's that's how it works. America is still having contact with Russia, even though there is a war in Ukraine, right? They're still in contact with each other. And this is also what happens with other countries, such as China and stuff like that, They still gather information. So let's take a look at something else we can specify as very, very dangerous. The vaccines. Yeah. The Global Vaccine Data Network is a multinational investigator-led research network with primarily interest in the area of vaccine safety and effectiveness. We make it possible for global collaborative retrospective analysis of health data by utilizing the existing capabilities of some partners and growing the capability of countries with less developed data infrastructures. So this is very interesting. They show the effectiveness or non-effectiveness of the vaccines, So The Global Vaccine Data Network is a multinational collaboration ready to conduct globally coordinated epidemiological studies on the safety and effectiveness of vaccines, whatever. You see, very, very important, interesting and important site to visit. So let's see what they have on the data dashboards. The GVDN developed protocols for partner sites to implement and determine background rates for health outcomes of interest, carry out the rapid cycle analysis, and perform observed versus expected analysis for adverse events of special interest. Anyway, very interesting to see this here. Let's see. Changes to these terms of use. GDBN. Very interesting stuff to look at, right? So we have that going on, and a lot more. Let's take a look at Al Jazeera and see what they have to tell us, right? Al Jazeera, there you go. In English, my Arabic is very bad.
Abu Azoum is live for us now in Rafah in southern Gaza. And Tarek, we're getting reports that the Israeli forces have briefly withdrawn from Nasser Hospital. What more can you tell us about that?
Yes, Laura, the situation, in fact, in Nasser Hospital is really chaotic, as we have been seeing more distressing and disturbing videos emerging from the hospital after the partial Israeli withdrawal there. We've been seeing how the situation is so catastrophic inside, as the Israeli military tanks had razed and ruined the majority of the vicinity of the hospital, raising the places that were allocated for ambulances to be stationed alongside for different facilities that had been widely damaged. And also the Israeli military forces in Nasser Hospital managed to destroy the mass grave that residents were forced to make to bury the dead who were not be able to get out or having an access out of the hospital to be buried in one of Gaza's cemeteries. And this is absolutely dire situation there, Ahmed, that the Israeli forces are not completely withdrawing from the hospital, but they are carrying out a partial withdrawal, returning back every now and then to the hospital, and as at the same time they are
very, very sad to see what's happening in the Gaza Strip. Those people have nowhere to go, and they're being harassed by the IDF, right? Very, very sad to see, but this is happening. And there's so much else to tell. Now, let's go to Arirang News. There you go. Arirang. Arirang is basically a song of a Korean soldier that comes home. And it's being used in South Korea and in North Korea, even though it's not really the same song, but the theme of the song is still the same. So, and they have a news station called Arirang News. So, let's take a look at what's happening in the Korean Peninsula. Let's take a look at this here. Oh.
Good evening. It is 10 p.m. here in Seoul. I am Adi, the AI anchor with the headline news. The South Korean government announced that it will maximize the operation capabilities of public hospitals.
Did you hear that? I am the AI announcer. It's like, oh my God, man, really?
In response to doctors' collective action against the medical school enrollment quota increase. At the first Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters meeting to discuss the issue on Friday, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said that they will work to extend the operating hours of public hospitals as much as possible on weekdays as well as on weekends and holidays. This comes after the government raised its health and medical treatment disaster crisis warning level to severe on Friday morning, which is one step up from the previous level of alert. The foreign ministers of South Korea, the United States, and Japan convened in Brazil on Thursday on the sidelines of the G20 foreign ministers meeting. This was the first trilateral meeting for South Korea's newly appointed foreign minister Jo Tae-yeol, who sat down with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts, Blinken and Yoko Kamikawa, with the top agenda items, including North Korea's escalating military threats. The three senior diplomats emphasized the need for joint efforts. Thursday's session also underscored the intensifying collaboration among the three countries on a broad spectrum of challenges, from ensuring.
Well, first of all, right, if you want peace within the Korean Peninsula, you have to stop the war drills, right, in the north of South Korea, right, which is in the south of North Korea. And, those drills really have to stop. And then you can come together at the table and talk about what's happening, right? We don't want any more escalations. We got enough war on our heads, right? We have the Ukraine war still raging in the east, the Donbass area. We have Israel, right, and the Gaza Strip. And we also have Sudan, which we highlighted yesterday. And there's so much more. We also have Afghanistan, right, the Taliban fighting ISIS-K. We have so much more. Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso leaving the ECOWAS system, right? And there's so much more. Ethiopia still wanting a harbor, and maybe they'll be involved in a war, great scale conflict, because they want a port, they want access to the sea. And they don't have any access to the sea, and no country is willing to give access to the sea. So it's going to be a very hard situation there. These are pressure points. Ja, dit zijn allemaal drukpunten, mensen. We hebben genoeg oorlog aan onze hoofd. Ja, we hebben dus Israël en Oekraïne en ook Sudan. En Afghanistan, daar vecht tegen ISIS-K. En ja, het is onvoorstelbaar. We hebben het nog niet eens over Myanmar gehad. Daar hebben we een coup-regering. Hier hebben we Myanmar. Dan heb je een coup-regering die heel veel mensen uitmoordt en noem het allemaal op. So we are taking a look at the world. Myanmar has a coup government who's waging a war against their own population. Big media blackout about that. But we are still watching as best we can. And there's a lot more to tell. But maybe someone watching has something external, such as a link. Just put a link in the chat, newsworthy link in the chat, and we'll show it to the people. So we're also going to take a look at Odyssey, right? Another streaming platform. and see what they have to show us. Something newsworthy. So we have Alex Jones live. Peace with Russia. Yeah, that's very interesting. Germans call for Russia-Ukraine negotiations. That's what we've been calling for ever since the war started. We said no war, negotiations, come to the table, and stuff like that. So we are on the mark again. We're going to show this here. Demonstrations in Berlin for peace with Russia.
Oder 3,5% werden, sagte er, je nach Weltlage.
Der Krieg mit Verhandlungen beendet wird und nicht nur in der Ukraine, total überraschend und in größenwahnsinniger imperialistischer Absicht in die Ukraine getrieben.
Ab 2028 leer ist.
Bevor der Krieg beginnt, wann wird man je verstehen? Seit der Bundestagsdebatte am Donnerstag über die Lieferung von weiterführenden, dass wir uns auf die Verteidigung des Landes konzentrieren sollen. Erst am Hindukusch.
Kriege lassen wieder die Erde erbeben.
Und Zurückhaltung in der Außenpolitik ist out. Heute ist kriegstüchtig in. Man kann gar nicht so viel essen, wie man kotzen möchte.
In der Ukraine und der Bundeswehr. Aus Deutschland hat das ukrainische Territorium von Russland aus als Aufmarschgebiet für einen anderen oder.
So we have that going on in Germany, right? People protesting, wanting peace with Russia. And that is, a very good thing, right? We don't want war with Russia. We want peace with Russia. That's what we want. We know who the real enemy is. We know. We were warned by President Eisenhower about the military-industrial complex, right? So we're going to take a look at that. We always play that, but repetition is good, they say. So we're going to show it again. Eisenhower with his military-industrial complex speech. And we are taking note of something that's been said in history.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
We are alert. We know what's going on. We really know what's going on, and the power that the military-industrial complex has is in the wrong hands, right? We also have a General Smedley Butler who warned that fascists wanted to take over the U.S. government. And that was also a warning from Eisenhower. It can be placed in the wrong hands. So we have Major General Smedley Butler who bears the plot, and we're going to take a look at this here. General Butler bears plot by fascists, Newtown Square, Pennsylvania.
I appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship. The plan as outlined to me was to form an organization of veterans, to use as a bluff or as a club at least, to intimidate the government and break down our democratic institutions. The upshot of the whole thing was that I was supposed to lead an organization of 500,000 men, which would be able to take over the functions of government. I talked with an investigator for this committee who came to me with a subpoena on Sunday, November 18th. He told me they had unearthed evidence linking my name with several such veteran organizations. As it then seemed to me to be getting serious, I felt it was my duty to tell all I knew of such activities to this committee. My main interest in all this is to preserve our democratic institutions. I want to retain the right to vote, the right to speak freely, and the right to write. If we maintain these basic principles, our democracy is safe. No dictatorship can exist with suffrage, freedom of speech, and press.
So there we have that, right? A warning from Smedley Butler, and we see that the U.S. government has become a fascist state, basically. And, it's up to us to turn this around, right? Because there was one president who had a very nice speech and had a very inspiring speech. This guy here, remember him? Ronald Reagan. He used to be an actor and then he was a president.
We must act today in order to preserve tomorrow. And let there be no misunderstanding. We are going to begin to act, beginning today. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. We, as Americans, have the capacity now, as we've had in the past, to do whatever needs to be done to preserve this last and greatest bastion of freedom. America must win this war. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule. Government by an elite group is inferior. We are a nation that has a government, not the other way around. Our government has no power except that granted it by the people. It is time to check and reverse the growth of government, which shows signs of having grown beyond the consent of the governed, and to demand recognition of the distinction between the powers granted to the federal government and those reserved to the people. The crisis we're facing today does not require of us the kind of sacrifice so many thousands of others were called upon to make. It does require, however, our best effort and our willingness to believe in ourselves and to believe in our capacity to perform great deeds. The solutions we seek must be equitable, with no one group singled out to pay a higher price. That we are a united people, to believe that together, with God's help, we can and will resolve the problems which now confront us. And after all, why shouldn't we believe that? We are Americans.
Yeah. For the people, by the people, right? That's a government that we want. Not some government that exploits the people. We don't want that. We want a government that helps us, that stands right next to us in crisis and stuff like that. That's what we want. That is a government that we want, right? We don't need a George Soros to persuade people to vote this or that way. No. I saw Trip and Fall's comment on the president of El Salvador who went to CPAC. Of course, we saw that, and we're also going to show it. And you hear that president saying that El Salvador was a very dangerous country, and now it's very safe. And who elected George Soros to dictate laws? That's what he basically said, right? So we have President Nayib Bukele from El Salvador at CPAC, and we're going to show this here.
Who elected Soros to dictate public policy and laws? Why does he feel entitled to impose his agenda? The global elites, they hate our success, and they fear yours. Institutions were created to serve the people, and not the other way around. Well, so if the government can print unlimited amounts of money, why do they collect taxes? You pay high taxes only to uphold the illusion that you are funding the government, which you are not. The government is funded by money printing, paper backed with paper. Confidence in your currency will be lost. The dollar will fall, and the Western civilization with it. We transform El Salvador from the most dangerous country in the world to the safest in the Western Hemisphere. The corrupt system work in tandem with the so-called international community, the NGOs, and of course the fake news, just like it happens here in the United States. Unelected bureaucrats are trying to instate public policy. Who elected them? They don't have a democratic mandate. If they want a seat in the table, they should run for office. Let the people vote. It will not be a pretty sight for them if the elections are free and fair. I mean, who elected Soros to dictate public policy and laws? Why does he feel entitled to impose his agenda? Let me tell you something. Soros and his cronies hit a brick wall in El Salvador. Thank God, and all the glory be to him, Salvadorans are now immune to his influence. No one believes his lies anymore over there. We just had free and fair elections. And we won in a landslide with more than 84% of the vote. Let that sink in. More than 84% of the people voted to continue our policies. Our victory is unprecedented in the history and modern democracies in the world. They also gave us a supermajority in Congress, more than that, 54 seats out of 60.
Now, I'm not totally for this guy, right? Because whoever has power has blood on his hands. But he does have a point, right? Who is George Soros? You know, he never ran for office, right? Ja, mensen, ik ben niet voor deze president, maar ik ben ook niet tegen hem. Want deze gast heeft El Salvador schoongemaakt. We zien de supermax-gevangenissen die hij ineens van de grond stampte en heel veel bendeleden heeft opgepakt en zoiets. En ja, je zou zeggen van, ja, Rogier, dat verzin jij. Dat verzin jij. Nou, nee, ik verzin niks, hè. We laten het ook zien. Max, prison. Zo. Oh, nee. Zo, nee. Kijk hier. 40.000 mensen zitten in een groot gevangenis, een supergevangenis in El Salvador. En ja, er zitten ook vast wel onschuldige mensen tussen.
Americas and will be home to 40,000 inmates, including some of the most violent people on the continent. President Nayib Bukele was given a special tour of the jail at Tecoloa, built in just 7 months. He was shown the 7 security rings, from the watchtowers and electric fences to the solid steel isolation cells.
It's important to remember that the people that will be held here, the terrorists who will be here, are the highest ranking members of the gangs, the historic leaders.
El Salvador has a gang problem. In March last year, the government declared a state of emergency to fight it. Previous efforts to break the gangs in El Salvador's overcrowded jails haven't worked. Even with 24-hour lockdowns, stripping and humiliating inmates, even putting rival gangs into overcrowded cells together. They were still able to run their operations on the outside and smuggle in phones, computers, guns, even prostitutes. Then last year, police and army arrested more than 62,000 suspected gang members and those that work with them. But the crackdown has led human rights organisations to complain innocent people are being scooped up, civil rights are being ignored. But ordinary people, tired of gang violence, say they're happy with the changes it's bringing.
I like them because at least now we feel safe. Before we always thought something could happen to us. Before we trusted no one. Now we feel safer.
With 60,000 people already in jail, El Salvador has 2% of its adult population behind bars, the highest incarceration rate in the world. The prison will start accepting new inmates in the coming days. They will be guarded by around 600 troops and 250 police officers. It will, say the authorities, be impossible to escape. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera.
Now, is everyone basically guilty? I don't think so. There are many innocent people in prison, and you know, this is what's happening in El Salvador. And if we look further down south, we see Ecuador, right, where there is basically the same problem in Ecuador. Last time we looked, we showed the, here we have Ecuador, right? And El Salvador is more up north. Here we have El Salvador. So And the last time we checked on Ecuador, we saw the news, people being taken hostage and stuff like that. It's really insane. And that was the last time we were shining a light on Ecuador. And let's see what's happening there right now. Even kijken, Ecuador nieuws. Zo. Ondertussen zijn we even aan het zoeken naar Ecuador. So we have some images of the Associated Press from 2 days ago in in Ecuador. So here we have Associated Press 2 days ago. Ecuador military opens doors to Cotopaxi prison after regaining full control in crackdown on gangs. That's from 2 days ago. That's the most recent we can find. Ja, 2 dagen geleden. Ze hebben een grote gevangenis. Het was een uitbraak van gevangenen. En die hebben ze weer terug in handen. En de gevangenen zijn ook weer terug. Oh, we gotta rewind first.
Que directamente todo el tiempo estuvo bajo el control de los PPLs. O no van a poder evidenciar en este momento, pero ya acá con los videos, las fotografías se... Pero por lo general en los lugares donde sí se encuentra... Listo, siguiente grupo, por favor, vamos.
So this is happening in Ecuador, right? They have big prison back in their own hands, and the prison inmates are, locked up again. And let's hope that Ecuador also stabilizes, right? We want peace. And I don't care if it's in Ecuador or El Salvador or North or South Korea, we want peace. That's what we want. And we will never, ever forget what happened in whatever country, We will never forget Mr. Warmbier for taking a poster of the North Korean dictator. We will never forget, never ever forget. So, and we know that the images are muddy the waters, they say, right? So you can't see through the water. We know that the media is also muddying the waters. Oh, Navalny had died. Oh. Yeah, Putin is to blame, right? Putin is to blame. But when, what's his name dies, right? Epstein, when he dies, does anyone blame Trump? Anyone? Nope. No one. But when Navalny dies, oh, it's Putin. Putin, oh, Putin bad. No, Navalny was a bad guy. He was a right-wing nationalist and stuff like that, you know. He didn't really mean much in politics in Russia. So, yeah, he was the bad guy. You know, they're showing the wrong side of someone, you know. Ja, mensen, Navalny was toch niet zo'n heel erg lief engeltje. En we gaan even kijken of we dat kunnen vinden. Ik had vanmiddag dus een filmpje gezien waar ze het over Navalny hadden. Kijk, oh ja, hier. Wie was Navalny? So, these are two Dutch guys criticizing the US State Department about Navalny and saying that nothing has been said about Gonzalo Lira, who died in Ukraine whilst he was covering the Ukraine war and having doubts about it.
Putin is responsible. What has happened to Navalny is yet more proof of Putin's brutality. No one should be fooled, not in Russia, not at home, not anywhere in the world. Putin does not only target his citizens of other countries, as we...
I'm not fooled by you. You poop in your pants, Biden. You know, you worthless piece of crap that you are. You poop in your pants when you're at the Pope, right? I don't believe any word that you say.
We've seen what's going on in Ukraine right now. He also inflicts terrible crimes on his own people.
Iedere Amerikaanse burger zou hiervan zijn bloed aan het koken moeten hebben. Want er is een Amerikaans staatsburger, of ik moet zeggen was een Amerikaans staatsburger, die tot begin vorige maand in Oekraïne in de gevangenis zat voor het uiten van kritische opvattingen over de Oekraïne in de oorlog.
So he's basically giving an introduction of Gonzalo Lira, who died in the Ukrainian prison, giving negative thoughts on the war in Ukraine.
En Oekraïne had hem specifiek met die aanklacht gearresteerd. Een Amerikaans staatsburger, van wie de Amerikaanse staat dus de verantwoordelijkheid heeft om zorg te dragen voor zijn welzijn en zijn veiligheid. In het geval dat hij in het buitenland in de gevangenis zit, om te proberen te onderhandelen met die regering Oekraïne. Nou, dat zou best wel voor elkaar gekregen kunnen worden, om diegene in ieder geval in de VS te krijgen. En zijn naam is Gonzalo Lira, Die was dus een Chileens-Amerikaans burger die in Oekraïne woonde en op zijn sociale media kritische uitingen over de Oekraïnse regering postte. Die is in de gevangenis vanwege het niet bieden van medische zorg die hij nodig had voor een longaandoening. Is hij omgekomen begin januari. Voordat dat was gebeurd waren er vragen gesteld aan het ministerie van Buitenlandse Zaken van de VS van...
A U.S. citizen who is residing in Ukraine has been arrested. The Ukrainian SBU released a press release saying he was for justifying Putin's invasion. So are you guys aware of this? How do we feel about our allies, detaining U.S. citizens for speech abroad?
I will say in general that we're aware of the report. We obviously support the exercise of freedom of speech anywhere in the world, and I'll leave it at that.
So you guys aren't working to get him released?
I'm going to leave my comments where I just left them.
Navalny is een extreem obscuur figuur in een ander land die omkomt. En dan is het niet alleen zo dat de minister van Buitenlandse Zaken daar ineens wel wat van te zeggen heeft. Nee, de president komt voor de camera daar een uitspraak over doen. Maar hun eigen staatsburger die door hun eigen bondgenoot langzaam in de gevangenis wordt vermoord, daar maken ze geen woord wel. Dit is een telling van hoe vaak Gonzalo Lira sinds 12 januari is genoemd. En in 3 dagen is Navalny al een veelvoud in deze Amerikaanse media genoemd, wat veelzeggend is. Nou, Dan hebben we over Navalny hier een korte rapportage over zijn ultranationalistische banden die op geen enkele manier ook maar worden genoemd bij Nieuwsuur.
Zag het wel in een of ander NOS-artikel, werd het wel benoemd. Voor de eerste keer dat ik dat zag.
Ja, nou het zou kunnen dat er is genoemd van hij is betrokken geweest bij een mars. Dit gaat over de democratische volksheld Navalny.
Моим сторонникам, которые удивлены, я хочу сказать вещь, что удивляться не нужно. Я 4-й год подряд хожу на русский марш. Им стоит бояться! Да! Им стоит бояться! Да! Кавказ соси! Кавказ соси! Москва! Кавказ! Аллах, пидорас! Уходите отсюда!
In de, hoe zeg je dat, terloopse verwijzing naar een nationalistische mars. Dit is niet gewoon, nationalisten, mensen die gewoon trots zijn op hun land. Nee, dit zijn nazi's. N-A-Z-I, dit zijn nazi's. En als je je als aanvoerder van dit gezelschap opstelt, dan ben je een nazi. Het is...
So the media never shows this, right? They never show this. You know, they don't show that Navalny is basically a Nazi. You know, they don't show that. Nope. But Navalny was killed by Putin. Unbelievable. This is happening. You know, they're changing the frame. You know, there's a frame of reality and a frame of consensus. They're changing the frame of consensus into reality, right? This is also what happened in Canada. You had that Ukrainian guy that was fighting against the Russians, and the Canadians did not know that the guy was actually a Nazi. Now, how can the Canadian government not know that? Well, I even know this, right?
The Second World.
So we're going to rewind.
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian-Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians.
You see what they're doing here? They're showing the frame of consensus. Oh, we got a guy who fought the Russians. Yeah, but he was siding with the Nazis that we also fought. Right?
And continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98. He's a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and we thank him for all his service.
You see the frame of consensus, he's a hero. He's a hero. But he has killed many, many Polish and whatever Jews, you know, but he's a hero. Well, actually, the martial law was declared last year, and last year there were supposed to be elections in Ukraine, and they postponed it because of the war in Ukraine. So, yeah, it's under martial law indeed, but it's been so for quite a while. So, yeah, 2022, yeah, that's better. Yeah, trip and falls, lay off the vodka, you know. So, anyway, we've been showing what's happening in and around the world for over an hour now. And we are going to close off with, of course, a song from our great friend over there in England, Ollie the Octopus. You're paying attention now, aren't you? We know what happened in 2011. There were riots in England and people were shot and killed and no one got answers. But still, we know what happened.
Speak. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's come up here today to volunteer to help clear up the mess of last night. Thank you. You are the true spirit of this city.
In the streets of London, the peace has been disturbed. Fires burning everywhere, the language of the unheard. There's a generation thwarted with no ownership and pride, and fat cats with bellies as wide as the rich and poor divide. A broken social contract, bottom-up austerity. Oh, we can condemn it, but we're paying attention now, aren't we? Blame it on the hoodies, blame it on the feral youth. But remember, you were young once and you cared about the truth. We sold out to the free market, made a couple of billionaires, and all we got was this mess and McDonald's everywhere. Keep unemployment high, keeps the cost of labor low, keeps young men out on the streets, and well, what do you know? Down to Dixon's, you can take some stuff for free. You can get an Apple Mac and a high-def TV. But if you work in Canary Wharf in a bank too big to fail, there's much better looting going on, and you don't have to go to jail. Steal from a generation for the pockets of a few, but it can only go so far, and you're paying attention now, aren't you? Of London, the peace has been disturbed. Fires burning everywhere, the language of the unheard. There's a generation thwarted with no ownership and pride, and fat cats with bellies as wide as the rich and poor divide. A broken social contract, bottom-up austerity. Oh, we can condemn it, but we're paying attention now, aren't we? Blame it on the hoodies, blame it on the feral youth. But remember, you were young once and you cared about the truth. We sold out to the free market, made a couple of billionaires, and all we got was this mess and McDonald's everywhere. Keep unemployment high, keeps the cost of labor low, keeps young men out on the streets, and well, what do you know? Down to Dixon's, you can take some stuff for free. You can get an Apple Mac and a high-def TV. But if you work in Canary Wharf in a bank too big to fail, there's much better looting going on, and you don't have to go to jail. Steal from a generation for the pockets of a few, but but it can only go so far. And you're paying attention now, aren't you?
Are you paying attention? Well, we certainly are at RHTVLive, and we give geopolitics almost every day, right? Because it's our planet. We live on this world, right? And we are in the majority. The people ruling over us, it's a small faction of people that want a depopulation program and total control over the people. And we do not want this. Our path is the path of freedom, right? That is what we want. Freedom and truth. May the truth prevail. We'll see each other next time. Thank you all for watching and sharing. And let's keep on discussing. Bye-bye.